a sense of community when you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. If you're a new viewer, yes, my last name really is Guitar, because people like to ask me that. Another thing they like to ask, do you play? Hello, I am the guitar. Huh? Anyway, got that out of the way. My guest today is from Toronto. He's a film critic, a writer, and a broadcaster. And I'm really pleased to have him on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, Thom Ernst. Ernst.
That's right.
Yeah.
You got it, like Max Ernst, the artist.
Okay, very good. So now I know you've written a book. I know you've had so many different things going on with CBC, right? So I don't know where to start. Let's start with film critic first.
Fair enough.
So when and how did that come about?
Well, that was actually sort of, that came out after the fact that I was hosting a show for quite a few years, and started off as the researcher, and it was a movie show here in Toronto, specifically for Ontario audiences, and that, when that ended, after 15 years, I really was sort of wondering what I was going to do, and I had friends, many of them who were guests on my show, who were journalists and film critics, and they used to say, well, why don't you write a review for us? And I started doing that, and I guess I'm good at it, or at least I'm adept at it enough that they kept hiring me. And then, I now write for two sites, northernstars.ca and Original Sin, CIN, Cinema Sin, get it? It's kind of clever. Both sites by former journalists. Okay. And I've been doing that. But then writing the book is my latest endeavor.
Oh, okay. I can imagine being a film critic. You have to have a special talent for it, because you have to pay attention to details and know the performers' names and whatever else they've done in the past, I would think, right?
Well, I think a history of film is absolutely essential, and I always had that. I had it growing up. I just, you're able to retain things that you're passionate about, and storytelling I'm passionate about, cinema I'm passionate about. So these things just stayed with me, and I carried it with me to the show I did, which was called Saturday Night at the Movies. Very similar to your, is it ACM, AMC? You have a show with double bills, etc., and we did somewhat of the same thing.
Okay.
And so that really was my foundation. So when I went into film criticism, I really knew very little about it, other than just giving my opinion of a movie. And it seemed to me that there was something more than just giving an opinion. There was acknowledging a history and acknowledging themes and acknowledging ideas, styles, etc. And so that becomes learned after a while. But I do think I had a solid base because of my love of cinema.
Right. Yeah, that sounds really cool, actually. Now you were also on air reviewer for CTV.
Yeah, brief time. Yeah, briefly. I'm not. I guess I don't have to hide it. I didn't enjoy that much. I found I found the live hits really, really. What's the word? Anxiety ridden, and especially since you have to give what television wants you to give a synopsis of the film. I'm really, really reluctant to do that. I will give a brief synopsis, but once you start saying, well, it's about this, and then you realize there's themes that you have to weave in, and before you know it, your 4 minutes are up. So I don't think I was particularly good on my CTV days, but I also didn't like the kind of almost anti-cinematic aspect to that kind of film criticism. Some people do it very, very well, and I think you have many people like Leonard Maltin was great at it. I think what other critics there from the States that I think are fabulous at it. Here in Canada, we have people like Richard Krause, who go on TV and do it very well. It just wasn't my thing.
Right.
So I lasted about 3 years doing that.
Well, it's good that you can recognize what is your thing, because some people want to just keep doing something, even though it's not something they're good at or happy about, right?
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong, Nancy. I love a paycheck. So I'll hang in as long as I can. And it wasn't me who said, okay, I'm done with this. It was them who say, okay, we're done with you. And I kind of understood. I may not have liked it immediately, but I went, yeah, I wasn't that good at it. Doesn't mean I if somebody says, oh, we do think you're good at it and let's have you back on, that I wouldn't give it another shot. But I do think there's something very freeing about acknowledging what you're good at and what you're not good at. And some of it is things that you can improve upon. But also, I'm of an age. I'll be 65 my next birthday, formerly a senior citizen. And I think when you reach that age, you don't have to pretend you're something you're not anymore. And you can let go of a lot of the baggage that you held on to so tightly in your youth.
Right. Very good point. Yes, I absolutely agree with you. So what about CBC's play?
Oh, well, now that's interesting, because that was a show, that was my first time as a critic on a show. Oh my gosh, that... you should read the history of that, and maybe your viewers will actually look into this. That show was kind of a news magazine show at CBC, and I was very lucky to get on it. It was my first time on air. I was also working at another network doing something else, and they allowed me to do this. And I worked with another host, a wonderful woman by the name of Michelle McCree, who did film criticism with me. Now, she was the polished, smart, good-looking one. I was the kind of floundering wherever I can be, trying to piece together a sentence one. So again, she was made for television, and she lasted a lot longer than I did. But the host of that show, his name was Jian Ghomeshi, it became a scandal. And you're familiar with him, are you? You nodded your head. But he became a huge scandal here in Canada. And it was after the fact. So that was unfortunate. But I'm kind of surprised you came across that, because I think I tried to take off that one off my resume, because it used to be a highlight, right? It's there. Did I a glitch on my part. But history sort of has rendered that little feather in my cap, kind of withered that feather in my cap. Right. I think.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to start. I'm saving the book to the last. Okay, just so
that's nice of you.
So I wanted, because I think, as you said, it's your latest endeavor. So I want to make sure we get that in. But there's so many other things here, like let's see, TVO's More to Life.
Oh yeah, so that was when I was at TVO doing Saturday Night at the Movies. They also had another show called More to Life. And because I was such a film enthusiast, I was only the researcher on the show at the time. And the More to Life people thought, let's have Thom on doing the film reviews. And again, so that's kind of where I cut my teeth, doing things like that. And then after More to Life, then I went to the CBC. So there, you probably also have The Agenda with Steve Paikin on there, and you probably might have other shows, Studio 2.
Yes,
those are all places that would invite me on their show, and they're high-profile shows here in Ontario. That I would go on, and I was able to develop a name for myself on there, both good and bad. There are people who loved what I did on there, and there are people who absolutely don't love what I do on there. And that's just the nature of the business.
I'm just going to say, even somebody says to me, "Oh, Nat, it's made a comment about I often mispronounce people's names," And somebody said, you should learn the name before you go on the show. Well, what they don't know is I practice the name ahead of time, but I get these weird things in my head. And then once it starts recording, it's gone.
Well, me too. Nancy, that happens to me all the time. And people who do manage to pronounce names correctly, it floors me. I'm totally impressed, but it's not something I have managed to do either very well.
No, I've decided I'm not going to worry about it, and people are really good. When you mispronounce it, they're usually very good. Nobody's ever said, oh my gosh, I'm never coming on your show again.
Exactly.
Now let's get to your book, because I think we've touched on all the other little things for the moment. But you wrote a memoir, right? The Wild Book of Waubamik. There I go.
The Wild Boy of Waubamik. Yeah.
Okay. Say that last name. Say the name again.
Waubamik. It's an indigenous name.
Okay.
So it's a town and a reservation, a indigenous reservation just outside the small town that I was born in. It's just such a great name, Waubamik. It's so much fun to say, and I don't expect people to actually be able to pronounce it first try. And it takes a while, but once you feel the syllables on your mouth and feel it rolling off your lips, it's one of those beautiful words to say.
Yeah, and like a lot of words, I live in Chilliwack, British Columbia. So when I first moved out here, it took me a while to get that one straight. Another indigenous name. So what?
Yeah, but you also have the advantage that Chilliwack was and this is from our era, Nancy.
Yeah.
You have the advantage that Chilliwack was also the name of a big rock band.
Absolutely.
When we were younger.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So tell me about the book. So
it's a memoir. It's a very dark book. It's
what sense dark?
It's a very dark book about being adopted, about being adopted into an abusive family, and then sort of working my way out of there. It's not a how-to book. So people who have experienced a similar childhood, like I have, this is not the book you read to find out how to get out of it. It's merely what I did. I think there was somebody who said, and I don't remember who, that because you have the disease doesn't mean you know the cure. And that's exactly how I feel about this book. I wrote it because I experienced it, and I'm a storyteller, whether it's in film or reading or writing. And so I just wanted to tell this story, and I wanted to tell the story, this very ugly story that I think people initially will go, I don't really want to invest time in reading about childhood sexual trauma, which is exactly what it is. And it was a decade of childhood sexual trauma. So it's I can't even say, one experience in childhood sexual trauma is not as bad as 10 years experience, because one experience sometimes is enough. So I'm not going to qualify it that way, but I will say that it's a dark book that I try to make lighter, or at least temper the darkness with humor, believe it or not, and hopefully with artistic writing. I believe it is. I believe I managed that, and a lot of the comments I've come across has certainly reinforced that idea with me. But that's the book. It's about a young boy, myself, being adopted, taken out of poverty from this town of Waubamik,
Right.
Birth parents, and put in another seemingly good family. And for the most part, there's a lot of good people in that family. But there was one person who was not. And that's what the book is about. But it's also about getting out of that. It's also about finding your way through life despite what obstacles are thrown at you. And I hope that's what people, when they read the book, will take from it.
Well, I can relate, and I suggest to people to read it, because I've tried to write my story, but I'm not a writer. I found it very, very difficult, and then how do you justify with the survivors, with people that are still in your life that may have been part of that abuse? I didn't know how to put it out there, right? So it's not an easy thing to do.
No, so I take it you experienced a similar thing than what I write about. And it is hard when there are people still living, and there'll always be people still living, let's hope. But when the abusers are, so I wasn't able to write this book until my adopted father, who I really don't refer to as my father. So the man who adopted me,
Right.
And who was the prime abuser, died. And then after that, I had to deal with my mother, who was in denial, etc. And then she passed on, and the book came out after that. But I still have siblings, adopted siblings, who are supportive. One is anyway. The other is not, and I wouldn't say she's not supportive. She's merely unable to express what I'm able to express.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make her right or wrong. It just makes her uncomfortable. And that makes it difficult too, because I love her. She's my sister, and I want the best for her, and I don't want to be the reason for her discomfort, and I don't want to be the reason that whatever abuse she went through lives on because of what I wrote. But I knew I had to write the book.
Yeah,
so.
and it's unfortunate for people like her, because like I don't know about your life, but for me, like that, a lot of what I experienced, and I then inflicted some of that on my children, and that was the hardest thing, you know. So if you can look at yourself, look at what you've experienced, and think, I did this because now I know better. Now I can change what I do, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So reading,
well, certainly that's part of the book. And I ran into a friend yesterday, a very good friend for years, and he just finished reading my book, and he crossed the street to say hello to me, and he said it was very triggering for him, and he reminded me that he didn't have a father, and that one of his goals in life, once he became a father, was to be the best father he could be. And we both came to the realizations that we had tons of therapy, we had tons of support. I mean, all of that helped us through to get where we are. But one of the real healing moments was becoming a parent and saying, this is a huge responsibility, and we are not going to make the mistakes our parents made. We made mistakes. I made huge mistakes, and I'm aware of them, but certainly not like my father.
Yeah, different mistakes, right? Yeah,
different mistakes, and I think more organic mistakes, you know, that you learn just through the process of experience. I had a therapist once who, when I first had my child, and I mentioned to her that I had hoped to be a better father than my father was to me, and her response was, you know, a bit offhand, but it was very true. She said, "Well, that bar's been set pretty low." So, you know, there is that too. But we do our best, and then there are those who don't do their best,
right?
And and that I think is revealed in the book.
One of the things that I think is important, like as human beings, we make mistakes, right? And there's no shame in the mistakes. The shame comes when knowing better, and then you don't change it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've not actually even heard that expressed that way, but that seems absolutely logical and correct. So
I'm not downer.
Well, is it a downer? I don't know if it is a downer, because, you know, I think that when we're aware of the errors we make, and then when we sort of tackle the things that have been dark for us and will be perceived as dark to others, and we say, you know, there are ways, there are techniques, there are solutions to these. You know, it hardly resonates as a downer to me, because it resonates as something sort of a strength, the human strength, and what's the word? Not tenacity. There's a word that people keep, not diligence either, but it'll come to us.
Yes.
Resilience. That's the word I'm looking for. You know, the resilience, and it's in all of us, or most of us anyway. And I think that is very positive. Talking about things that are negative, like talking about things that are hard to talk about shouldn't be, I think, necessarily avoided. They shouldn't be avoided. But once you talk about them and talk about how they can not hold you back, and how they are not a death sentence, neither are they a sentence to a life of gloom and doom and disappointment. You know, I'm a white male. We all know that being a white male has its advantages in this society, and I acknowledge that as well. So I will say that when I speak that way, I speak about through my perspective, through the lens that I have been given.
Of course. Yeah.
So other people's struggles are different, but I dare say that, you know, on some level we are all equal. Maybe not the way society views us, but as human beings, we are all equal and all incredibly capable of reaching goals that we didn't anticipate we could reach.
That's so true. Great things. I mean, people come from nothing and achieve all kinds of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, one of the most freeing things for me, and maybe you feel the same way, is when you acknowledge that you made mistakes. It's so freeing.
Yeah, it is. You know, it's funny. My book is not about the mistakes I made, which I've given myself permission to do.
Right.
And I thought about it. I thought of including the mistakes I made that I had to, mistakes in relationships. There, especially as a young man, I certainly didn't have any idea how relationships work. I wasn't given those tools. I knew that there were certain things about respect, et cetera, and you don't push boundaries, but you know, when I look back at the way I treated some of my early girlfriends, condescending to them, or even just being downright nasty, things I had to learn that just were not okay. It doesn't excuse me from them. But I had to learn from them. And I do try to reach out to some of those people. And some of them just don't want to, hear from me. And I have to accept that, because it's not about me feeling okay. Like, do you forgive me? Great. I can feel okay now about that. I have to sort of always hold on to the negatives I have done. And I always have to sort of be prepared to answer to them. Not explain them away, not make excuses, just to say, yeah, I was a jerk and I'm sorry. And if if that apology is not accepted, I understand. It's not up to you to make me feel better after I made you feel bad.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of insight, I think, growing up the way you did, and I think about it like in terms of, for myself, we are who we are. That is part of who we became, or why we became, who we are now, right? It's kind of interesting when you look at it in a different perspective. I mean, if the world were different, I would have been tall and into a happy, wealthy family, but instead I was born into large family of short people who are very poor. It just is what it is, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's the physical things we can't change. And I often thought, because I always wanted to write, and I could never get that book going.
Right.
And I always wanted to write. And now I have this book, and I am a writer because of this book. And I used to think I would be able to write if that past didn't happen to me. Right. And I would have. And then I thought, well, you know what? No, maybe my desire to write is because of that. Now, what I realize now is that I was able to write, but and I was always a writer. Now, I would not have written this book if that past didn't happen to me. Right. I would have written a different book, but I still would have been a writer.
Right.
As it is, I had to get this book out of my system before I can continue on.
Hold it up once again so everybody can see the title of it, and they could probably, where can you find out?
Waubamik, that's my name, Thom Ernst with an H.
Right?
Yeah.
And where you can buy it, on Amazon, or where do they get it?
Well, hopefully most bookstores across Canada. It used to be Indigo. Indigo's going through, as we do this interview, I've gone through some problems with their computers, etc. But I think you could probably get it there. I would just go to any bookstore in your area and just say, ask for the book, The Wild Boy of Waubamik, and you might want to spell it out. And then that bookstore should be able to order it in for you. But Amazon certainly is a good place to start.
Right, yeah. Okay, well, we're going to end it there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just stay on camera. I just want to say thank you, everybody, for watching the show. Hopefully you like what you hear. And if you don't, well, tell it somebody else. I have thin skin, okay? But anyway, you've been listening to Thom Ernst, and I've really enjoyed listening to you, Thom, by the way. So thank you, everybody. I hope you continue to watch the show. In the meantime, take care and peace out, folks.
A sense of community, Chilliwack's a place to be. A sense of community where you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me. It's multicultural, you're sure to see it all. Chilliwack's a place to be, you'll see. Come party in the park, go dancing after dark. Chilliwack's a place to be, you'll see.